Tulsi Gabbard was asked about Syria and the Kurds at the debate this week. Let's see how she handled that.
This week, you said that American troops should get out of Syria now. You don't agree with how the president handled the withdrawal. What would you have done differently? How would you have pulled out troops without the bloodshed we're seeing now?
Oh, first of all, we've got to understand the reality of the situation there, which is that the slaughter of the Kurds being done by Turkey is yet another negative consequence of the regime change war that we've been waging in Syria. Donald Trump has the blood of the Kurds on his hand, but so do many of the politicians in our country from both parties who have supported this ongoing regime change war in Syria that started in 2011, along with many in the mainstream media who have been championing and cheerleading this regime change war. Not only that, but New York Times and CNN have also smeared veterans like myself for calling for an end to this regime change war. Just 2 days ago, the New York Times put out an article saying that I'm a Russian asset and an Assad apologist and all these different smears. This morning, a CNN commentator said on national television that I'm an asset of Russia. Completely despicable. As president, I will end these regime change wars by doing two things: ending the draconian sanctions that are really a modern-day siege, the likes of which we are seeing Saudi Arabia wage against Yemen, that have caused tens and thousands of Syrian civilians to die and to starve. And I would make sure that we stop supporting terrorists like al-Qaeda in Syria, who've been the ground force in this ongoing regime change war. I'd like to ask Senator Warren if she would join me in calling for an end to this regime change war in Syria, finally.
By the way, Elizabeth Warren went on there to say, like, oh, I want to get out of the Middle East, and then she, kind of meandered all over the place, as she did a lot that night. But this happened a lot where I think there were like 3 separate occasions where Tulsi tried to kind of go at Warren, and then it just got lost in the madness, and one time they cut directly to commercial. Aaron Burnett was like, anyway, we got to go to break. So, certainly questionable to say the least as to how she was kind of escaping what Tulsi did to Kamala. Although, to be fair, I think the arguments against Kamala landed a lot better, and they were crystal clear. And Elizabeth Warren is definitely more intelligent than Kamala and a little more slippery than Kamala. And also Elizabeth Warren, well, Kamala also had the media loving her at the time. They've since soured on her a little bit because she's petering off, but they love Elizabeth Warren now. But yeah, so Tulsi didn't land as big of a blow on Elizabeth Warren in this debate as many of us were hoping. But let's talk a little bit about her answer there. So I wish she led a little differently in how she responded. So he asked the question, like, what would you have done differently? I really do think that was an opportunity for her to lay out one of the arguments I made on this show, which is the problem isn't that Trump got out. The problem is he didn't have UN peacekeepers fill the U.S. troop void before we got out. Or he didn't broker a deal with the Syrian government and the Kurds so they could replace us before we got out. I think she had a very good opportunity where she could have said that. She could have made the anti-war case while also, like, taking the treatment of the Kurds seriously. Like, I think that's the trick. That's the line you have to walk on this issue to really land with people. You can't come across as, like, just, I don't know, totally ambivalent as to what's happening to the Kurds, and you can't just kind of go back immediately into your stump speech about ending regime change wars. You just have to be like, well, what's happening to the Kurds, it's war crimes, it's terrible, but the way we could have prevented it, the problem wasn't us getting out, the problem was how we got out. We should have replaced that U.S. vacuum with UN peacekeepers or broker a deal between the Kurds and the Syrian military so they could provide the buffer that we were providing. Okay. Now, after that, yes, the rest of what she said is true, and it's really weird now that so many people on the Democratic side are pretending like that's not the case. Like, do you have any idea how naive it is to think, like, we were actually there for the reason of protecting the Kurds? Guys, we don't care about American babies in Flint, Michigan who are getting poisoned by water. You think the government cares about the Kurds? I mean, that's so beyond naive. No, one of the reasons why we're there, yes, the main point is a regime change war. Assad is an ally of Russia. We view this all as a geopolitical Cold War chessboard. So we want to take out, the ally of Russia so that we have a foothold in the region. And of course, as Ben Norton has been pointing out on Twitter over the past few days, it's true that this particular region in Syria, the northeastern part of Syria, this is what's the breadbasket. This is the breadbasket of Syria. This is like where there's a tremendous amount of oil. So if you think that U.S. intervention doesn't have to do with regime change, you think it doesn't have to do with resources, you think it doesn't have to do with this geopolitical chessboard and a power play, I got a bridge to sell you. Obviously, we're not there for noble reasons. Guys, we were funding jihadists there for years. Like, it's not noble if you're funding the jihadists. That's so obvious. So, she fought back against New York Times there, and it's really she was put in a difficult position because they really ran. And I've been critical of Tulsi recently. She backpedaled on Medicare for All in a way that really just upset me. And there was the defense of the Ellen hanging out with war criminal George Bush. So there's a lot of stuff that I've been like, come on, recently. But she got viciously smeared in that New York Times article. Oh my God. It was like a greatest hits of nonsense arguments against her. Oh, she's an Assad puppet. She's a Putin puppet. This is somebody who's in the military to this day. She's in the military to this day. She has served the country, and she's being smeared as like a puppet of Putin. Why? Because she wants to end the regime change wars? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. She bucks orthodoxy. She bucks the consensus of the two parties on war, and so that's why she's so grossly smeared. But however, having said all that, it wasn't her best debate. I think it was actually one of Tulsi's worst debates. But she did have a lot of odds stacked against her, and that sucks. And unfortunately, I really do think that this situation that unfolded with the Kurds, it made it tougher for the anti-war voices to make that case in a way that lands with everybody. And that's not her fault. And to be fair to her, she had done these... She did a video that she tweeted where she talked about how Donald Trump has the blood of the Kurds on his hands, and she is concerned about them. But it makes it harder because now the propaganda is in overdrive, and the propaganda is saying no, obviously we should be there and we should stay there indefinitely. So it's an uphill battle, but that's why you got to sharpen those arguments and you got to be crystal clear. And I do wish that she had said the thing about, the problem isn't that we left, the problem is how we left. Here's how I would have left. But if people are in favor of staying there, well, then be honest about it. And, that's what she actually destroyed Mayor Pete later on this same point, which I'll show you in a little bit. But this could have been a little sharper. It could have landed a little harder, and it's a little upsetting that it didn't.